Recording in progress.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. It's nice to see everybody. Welcome to the Chatham Township Committee meeting of March 26th. We are coming back from executive sessions, so we have confirmed that adequate notice has been given, and I'd ask everybody to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, I think many of us are here for the same reason. I'm certainly excited to start the meeting honoring a longtime volunteer for the municipality and for the broader community, Tom Salvis. I met Tom almost 10 years ago. At the time, I knew him as the producer and videographer for the Township's Comcast broadcast and as a volunteer for the Mayor's Wellness Committee. It's amazing to me how many other things he's helped with over the years, and he's always approaches every person and every project with kindness, patience, and enthusiasm. I'm excited to have the opportunity to honor his contributions, and I thank Committeeman Lois for nominating Tom Salvis. There is no one more deserving. Tom is joined this evening by his wife, Sandy, daughter, Liz, and her husband, Brian McGuckin, and Tom and Sandy's grandchildren, Callum, who will be 9 in a couple of weeks, and Gemma, who is 6. Callum and Gemma go to Southern Boulevard School, where Liz went to elementary school. I'm going to read the proclamation, and then we'll ask Tom to come up for his Citizens Award. Which, by the way, we had a lot of trouble fitting all your volunteerism on this sheet. Good problem to have. Whereas Tom Salvis has a long history of service to the Township of Chatham and the Chatham community as a whole. And whereas Mr. Salvis has worked with fellow residents in many capacities, including the Mayor's Wellness Campaign Advisory Committee, Historical Society, Library of the Chathams, and many different iterations and organizations of the Township Committee and Chatham Township municipal staff. And whereas Mr. Salvis is a member and past trustee of the Historical Society of Chatham Township, having documented a great deal of history in the Chathams directly on video, with audio recordings, and through photographs. And whereas Mr. Salvis collaborated on the planning and implementation of 3 historical markers erected in our township, and also was part of the critical production team for the Chatham Colony Association Centennial event. And whereas Mr. Salvis is a United States Air Force veteran who served on active duty and reserve assignments with the rank of captain in the United States and Germany. And whereas Mr. Salvis is one of the creators of the Veterans Project of the Chathams, which is a biographical collection of local veterans on video available on demand in an archive maintained by the Library of the Chathams. And whereas Mr. Salvis was the driving force behind the effort to share meetings live on video over several years, from concept to actual launch in 2009, and continued to serve as producer for a decade. And whereas during his tenure as the Government Access TV manager, Mr. Salvis produced 225 Township Committee meetings over 10 years, as well as more than 70 Board of Education meetings prior to 2018. And whereas Mr. Salvis is generous with his own funds and resources, quick to provide personal equipment, expertise, and his valuable time, and does it all with a smile that leads his signature kind manner. Now, therefore, I, Stacy Ewald, as Mayor of Chatham Township, present to Tom Salvis a Chatham Township Citizen Award in recognition of his various contributions to the Chatham community in a variety of service roles. Tom, do you want to come up? Much bigger minefield.
Yeah.
So we have a new item of recognition. We have a new pin.
Yes.
And do we know who took the photograph for this pin?
I think I did. I was thinking it was right earlier today.
think about 10 or 12 years ago, we came in and photographed that emblem there. And Greg has had that file forever, and that is, oh.
And you will
okay.
be the first one
Oh, thank
to
you.
receive that pen.
Thank you very much.
Your citizen here.
Oh, whoa, beautiful.
Oh, please,
Yes.
yeah.
I am familiar with the chambers, and as I would tell people, we moved to the township 36 years ago, and the driving force was not only because we knew something about the community, but daughter Liz was ready to enter kindergarten, and she did in Southern Boulevard School, and now the grandchildren, Callum and Gemma, are students at SBS as well, so the tradition continues. But the whole television adventure started when I had a chat with my neighbor, former Mayor Joe Riley, up on Lisa Drive, and we determined in about 2008 or so that we needed to televise our meeting. So as you explained, we got things going, and I worked with former Mayor Nicole Hagner and a number of people during that time to follow to make it happen. I'm pleased to see former Mayor Kevin Sullivan is here, and Kathy Abbott has joined as well, whom I collaborated on another project. It was when single stream recycling hit this town. And we produced an award-winning, actually from the county, little video on what you need to do with single stream recycling. And I think folks are probably following it pretty well, but we felt good about that. I think that was about 2010 or so. So I'm honored that the committee is recognizing my accomplishments, and community equals collaboration. And I think one of the great things about Chatham Township, Chatham Borough, with whom I've also collaborated on a number of initiatives, is that people get out and they actually do things. And my association now more recently with Andy and Karen from the library on the Veterans Project has gotten me to meet several veterans from the Chathams and document some interviews with them, which are available on the library website. I think we have some interesting things coming as a veteran, as you mentioned. So stay tuned for some more news about veterans of the Chathams and some plans that we have to further recognize their sacrifice and service to the community. So again, thank you very much. I really appreciate this. It's been a lot of fun. The work will continue as we continue into year 37 here up on Lisa Drive, but it's great. And now we have the next generation who's also living in the township. So thank you all very much.
I do want to bring up your family. I wanted to bring up your family for photos, but I did want to give residents an opportunity if they wanted to say anything, share any words about Tom before we kind of bring everybody up for photos.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Committee, thank you. Tom, congratulations. We spent a lot of time in this room together, and you know, that resolution and commendation was wonderful. But to know Tom and to see Tom in action and to see what he did in this room with the camera work and the angles and the artwork after it was all done, and inserting slides and pictures, and just really brought it to a higher level. We used to joke about the ratings were going through the roof at home. So many people were tuning in, and a lot of it was a sincere commentary about Tom's wonderful work. He took it to a higher level. Instead of just a wide-angle lens capturing, you know, he zoomed in and captured the moment of many of the meetings. But so much of what Tom has done, if you know him, if you've been on the other side of his camera, could you turn just a little bit, Kevin? Stacy, could you move just a little to the left? You know what? I don't like the background. Let me get another one. But he is the consummate professional. The work he's done for the veterans, I commend him. He has done some wonderful interviews, our own residents who serve the town, policeman Anthony Laporto, who is a Navy submariner. But really his work with Colonel Schaefer was really phenomenal, and what he did for the Colonel and that family. 40 years, longest serving physician, United States Air Force, a fellow 45, a fellow Air Force veteran that Tom really, as only a veteran could, similar and same service, you know, really went out of his way to honor him. So your work with the library has been tremendous, but whether it's a Veterans Day, Memorial Day, park opening, pick up the phone, call Tom. Can you be there, Tom, to take a few pictures? You bet. So I'm sure he has wonderful pictures of his family and grandchildren as well. But thank you. You have captured so much of living history in this town. It's really been phenomenal. So thank you.
Great. I owe Gemma an apology because I said her name wrong, and it's such a beautiful name. I apologize for that.
Hi, I'm Kathy Abbott. Do I say anything? Not my address, right? So I just wanted to say that I worked with Tom on the Environmental Commission and as a Township Committee member. And he is as really Kevin Sullivan already said, a consummate professional, has a great studio voice, like, okay, in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go kind of thing, and just makes everyone calm, and you get the feeling that he's for everybody, never against anyone, and just wants to do the best for the town. So I'm so glad that we're having this, what you call it, recognition for Tom. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Ellie, I want to thank you.
Oh, thank you very much again.
And if Ellie wants to come up to the podium, you're welcome to.
Andy, did you want to say a few words?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want to say something? Sure.
I wasn't quick enough. If I may. I'm Andy Hollander. I am president of the Board of Trustees of the Library of the Chathams. And Tom, it's what you were saying, Mayor Ewald, about the list of accomplishments is not easy to put into a succinct package. Tom, you're an inspiration. The amount of contributions that you've made to the Library of the Chathams and really to our community is so long. I know that you and I have spoken, and one of the things I appreciate about what you just said is the service and the sacrifice that you document in our community. So the library, any library, is going to be talking about stories, about narratives. What you are doing with the narratives and the interviews and the hard work that you're putting in and showing our community about the service and sacrifice of not only yourself and people like Kevin Sullivan is going to be a testament for generations to come. I urge any of you who have not yet had a chance to look at the Veterans Project of the Library of the Chathams webpage on the library website to take a look and just sort of sit down, press play, and get to know some of the veterans who have served our country and our community. So Tom, I'm just really honored to be able to speak as one of many who recognize and applaud you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I should have mentioned that some of my activities have certainly been working with all of our first responders, from our police department to our fire departments to our DPW and to the Chatham Emergency Squad, of which Son-in-law Brian is a 10-year member this year. So we continue to honor our first responders and respect the very important critical work that they are doing. So that's a little bit of my thanks to you.
Okay, let me see, do I have my microphone? Okay, that was a lot of fun. On the agenda tonight, we'll have the opportunity to honor other dedicated volunteers in our community with a resolution to increase the LoSAP payment for our emergency squad and fire department volunteers. Very timely announcement. The LoSAP payment is a small sum deposited into a retirement account for the benefit of our first responder volunteers who meet minimum service requirements. It's been almost a decade since the last LoSAP, or since LoSAP was increased, and I'm pleased we're able to bring those payments in line with where they should be. Today, we'll move forward with the acquisition of the 17-acre parcel at 441 Southern Boulevard, also known as the Fensky property. This purchase had been in the works for a long time, and as some may recall, had to be put on pause from last year while the family worked out some details regarding the trust. We're pleased we're now able to move forward, and I thank our administrator and our township attorney for their efforts. Also on the agenda, we will formally introduce the 2024 budget with the goal of holding the public hearing and final vote at the April 23rd meeting. Our administrator held a full budget presentation at our workshop meeting on March 12th. Tonight he'll go over some of the highlights, but I encourage residents to watch the full presentation on YouTube for more detail. You could find the link on our township website. I want to thank the Finance Committee, which includes Deputy Mayor Choi, Committeewoman Rowland, our township administrator, and our CFO for all their work on the budget. We have many budget challenges ahead of us in the next few years, but knowing we're still in a strong financial position, I asked our Finance Committee to work towards a flat tax, to maintain a healthy surplus, and to set aside funds for capital projects to mitigate debt. They delivered on all three. It's a good budget that we should all be proud to endorse. As I mentioned, we're in a great place today financially, but we have budget challenges ahead. We have nearly 10 million improvements needed for our wastewater treatment plant to make sure it's viable in the future. We have a request from both of our fire departments for fire trucks to replace existing trucks past their useful life. That request is for approximately $3 million. The library is looking for the township and the borough to contribute funds towards their $7 million capital project. We have a county-mandated town-wide revaluation that we will need to implement over the next couple of years that can run anywhere from $300,000 to $500,000 or more. And the state just passed new affordable housing legislation locking in the timeline for the fourth round of affordable housing, which is due next year. This is all on top of the normal operating budget pressures and the annual capital improvement efforts, like repaving the roads, replacing edge police and DPW vehicles and equipment. We will work to engage residents and get their input on prioritization of capital projects, and our administration will continue to work to identify grant funding. So I guess the point is enjoy the moment in terms of our good news, because there's more coming down the road. Last but not least, I'd like to highlight the retirement at the end of the month of DPW employee Raymond Clark. Ray started his tenure at Chatham Township on April 5th, 2010, with the Water Pollution Control Plan, taking care of the daily checks and maintenance of the facility. In May 2014, he transferred to the Buildings and Ground Department. He started out as a custodian for the buildings, which included Town Hall, the police station, and the DPW. Ray's last project was the rehab of the dock over at Colony Pool. The dock was ripped down to the pillars and rebuilt. Ray is fantastic at organizing. He spent a lot of time in the shop where he reorganized the parts area to save time for the two mechanics. Ray is still very active in the Boy Scouts, donating his time when he can. He's also an avid camper. Ray's knowledge and expertise of Chatham Township will be missed, and we wish him the best of luck in his retirement. Okay, I think we will move on to reports. Committeeman Lois.
Thank you, Mayor. In my role as liaison to Colony Pool, I have to tell the public that the early bird period is ending at the end of this month. So if you're planning to get our best rates of the season, please take action before the end of this month, which is this week. The Colony Pool Committee is looking for feedback. They sent a bunch of we sent a bunch of advice from the Colony Pool Advisory Committee, and specifically on the poster contest promotion, or looking for some feedback from this committee, and specific requests such as everyone's favorite topic here, sand toys, and a few others, as well as our calendar of events. I'd love to be able to report back to them to know what what has been approved or what's moving forward. So if anyone has input on that, I would love to hear it. For utilities, we had a major storm event on March 11th in the township. 2,000 residents, 2,000 residential addresses were affected, and that was for multiple hours. That was due to a storm. There was saturation of the ground. There was many trees down. There was also utility poles that were broken. It wasn't, of course, just Chatham Township. It was New Providence, Long Hill, which apparently we are very connected with Long Hill and the utility grid. I have talked to to my counterpart there, and the good news, there's some good news, and then there's some opportunity here. There's planned improvements. Some of them are ongoing right now. That there's a transmission line that's underway, and people have seen that work is ongoing there, and that's one that feeds the Green Village substation and cuts through the whole town up from River Road and generally along the power line, and then it diverts at some point. But the residents that have been affected by that are aware of it, and it's ongoing work. But beyond that, there's planned improvements at the Gillette and the Green Village transmission stations, and I'm told that those are going to bring improvements. Now, those improvements are already budgeted for and are not related to the Energize plan that JCP&L is presenting to the BPU. They have an Energize plan. They're hoping to have a rate increase and do additional improvements. Apparently, their improvement plan is $900 million that they're presenting, and they're asking for rate increases in order to achieve that. Our liaison has specifically asked to present to us, at least so that we would know what our portion of improvements under the Energize plan would be. So in addition to the Gillette and Green Village substation improvements and the transmission line that's being done, it's ongoing now, they would like to present. So, maybe at our next workshop meeting or whatever this committee finds acceptable, they would be happy to present what portion of that $900 million would be coming to Chatham Township and what those improvements might be. I personally think that might be a good idea, just so we know what we are supporting or not supporting in terms of their energized plan. Okay, and then since I'm first, I'm going to take a little bit of leeway here, if you'll allow me, Mayor, just to report on the EMS dinner. I have some specific stats about the great things that they've done there. So the EMS installation of new officers dinner, the annual dinner was held recently, and I'm always impressed with the stats of what that volunteer organization is up to. So in 2023, they had answered 1,451 calls. Over 250 calls required a second or third crew. So that's a crew beyond the on-duty crew. All calls were attended to. That's really saying something. In the past, in past years at the dinner, they've explained that other communities where the volunteerism, especially for EMT work, they do not necessarily, they're not necessarily able to answer and respond the way that our squad does. 58 members were responding when not on duty. So that's for those second and third crew calls. 58 members responded in 2023, not on duty. 20 members had over 100 LOSAP points, and 100 members are active on the squad. So LOSAP is a high standard of where you earn certain points for meetings attended and on-call hours, and that's a very high standard. So that's impressive. There was 11 new members, 11 new members in 2023, 4 new members just in 2024 so far as of the night of the dinner, and 2 more are on deck. So the participation and the volunteerism in that organization is truly amazing. And they gave out also the Dick Richards Award that night, which is not often awarded, and it was given out to Jim Martin. And when I say it's not often awarded, the criteria for is only to a role model and outstanding EMT who does extensive extra service, shows leadership, makes contribution to the efficiency and the collegial atmosphere of the squad. And some of the comments made about him were that Jim Martin was a go-to guy and a problem solver. There were a lot of references to duct tape and that he's great at maintaining the vehicles, fixing things, as well as the patients, and then a lot of kind comments about his collegial contributions to the squad. So, Jim Martin, we thank you. Thank you for that, Mayor.
Thank you. Committeeman McHugh?
Thank you, Mayor. The Environmental Commission and Open Space teams have installed the trail markers on the Green Village Pond Trail. So you won't get lost. Get out there and check it out. Enjoy the spring. The Adoptive Drain program, which I've mentioned a couple times already, is officially kicked off. You can link to sign up at newjersey.adoptadrain.org. The township has 1,021 storm drains. If we keep them clear, it'll help be a great tool to minimize the risk of flooding. The native plant sale with the Great Swamp Watershed Association goes live on April 1, and that's not a joke. It really does. Reminder that, once again, we will be holding a Tri-Town Spring Yard Sale, and that benefits the Great Swamp Watershed. The yard sale date is May 4th, so anticipate, and you can check out the Facebook page of the Environmental Commission for information on that. And on May 6th, the Environmental Commission will be hosting a talk at the Library of the Chathams with a Rutgers Master Gardener titled Fight Invasives. Go Native to kick off Native Plant Month. I didn't realize there was a Native Plant Month, but we do have it, and get down there and check it out. Speaking of the library, and I'll transition to that, the Teen Center grand opening will take place on Friday, April 12th, from 3:30 to 6. All residents are invited to attend. It's a great space. We really should check it out. When the planets are in the appropriate alignment, which seems like it may be coming soon with all the collaborating efforts of many, the back entrance to the library actually, at the moment, is scheduled to reopen hopefully the first week of May. All right? So hopefully that's some great news coming. When the residents, this is something that has happened over the past, when the residents get a call from the library, oftentimes your caller ID would show Chatham Borough. This, thank you to Jamie Sabonia's efforts, has been rectified, and this has finally been corrected after a very, very long time. So your caller ID, when the library calls, will say the library or Library of the Chathams. So you know who's calling. That's my report, Mayor.
Thank you. Committeewoman Rowland?
Thank you, Mayor. The exterior restoration project at the Mount Vernon School continues on schedule. So hopefully that will be completed in the next couple of months. And the Chamber of Commerce for the Chathams recently celebrated 100 years in existence in Chatham. They recreated this past weekend a photograph that was taken, I believe, in 1930 with members of the Chamber in front of the train station, so that was pretty neat. And I encourage anyone who's a business owner or just interested in meeting everyone. There are meetings that are held, I believe, monthly at great places like Pascarella and Scoops, and you don't have to have a brick and mortar business to be a member. You can have a consulting business or any kind of business, and it's really a great group and good to get involved.
That's it. Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. With the commencement of spring means the conclusion of winter, and this past winter was the first year post-COVID that the Chatham Recreation Ski and Snowboard Club kicked off. It was a tremendous success. We had hundreds of children registered for the program. Every week that the buses went out to Shawnee, it was at capacity, near capacity. So I think it was just a testament to the demand for adding that program to the portfolio of recreational activities here in the township. So please do look out. The intention is to continue the program given the success. So this coming, with the advent of this coming winter, please look out for registration information. And the program is always looking for chaperones. So if you're a ready, willing, and able adult, please consider participating and making the program ever more robust. Early in March, the Joint Rec Advisory Committee was offered the opportunity to listen in on a presentation held by Musco Lighting. It's a vendor that installs field lights. They were, in fact, the vendor that installed the lights here at Shunpike Field. They had presented a concept proposal to light Lum Field in the borough. And a couple things that I think are worth noting. I think with the technological advancements and progress in terms of better or enhanced designs for these fields, they were able to present what I thought was certainly an intriguing, potentially compelling installation of lights at Lum Field. The driving force here is, finite resources being outpaced by, the ever-growing demand for field space. The recreational programs are continually growing. So he presented a couple case studies that were successful in its implementation and well embraced by the immediate vicinity. One was in University of Colorado, and the other was in Allendale in Bergen County, both in heavy residential areas. And both were, by all measures, deemed to be a success. Allendale, by way of anecdote, it was a third attempt to get that field lit up, and a number of the residents said it actually is a wonderful design. Near zero to zero leakage in terms of a light off property, no glare. The technological advancements to the light, the stanchions and the light heads are quite magnificent. In my capacity as a liaison, the Township liaison for the Board of Education, just a couple quick highlights. Dr. LaSouza had presented preliminary budget to the board, $91 million budget, about $72 million in appropriations, the balance about $5-6 million coming from state aid. We have 3,500, approaching 3,500 students enrolled in the Chatham Public Schools. They do anticipate a slight decline, certainly flat for the earlier years. One of the positive anecdotes is we continue to be below the state median average in terms of cost per pupil enrolled in the schools. My takeaway from this was, I think they are fairly diligent stewards of the budget, the operational side at the school. There are obviously a number of factors here that are sort of runaway numbers that are quite candidly exogenous to the school, things like health insurance, out-of-district educational costs. But as far as variables within their control, it does appear that they're quite studious as to finding ways to keep that budget within arm's reach. An interesting thing that popped forth during this most recent meeting was a proposal was put forth by Harding Township. The proposal is to send their students to Chatham. They currently have about 25 students per grade at the high school level. Nothing certainly written in stone. I think the Board of Education received the message with open arms. We'll obviously consider it in earnest, and we'll certainly not make a decision based on the long-term best interests of the township. But additional students, but obviously additional fees for the school, and funds are ever needed. So something to keep in mind. If you would like to stay abreast of it, I think they certainly will continue providing any updates during their Board of Ed meetings, or you can come to our wonderful committee meeting. I'd be happy to update you. Give you my synopsis there. One last thing with regard to the Lum lights at the borough. It was a very concept design stage type meeting. They of course will be providing additional open sessions for the public to partake, listen, get informed, and perhaps provide some feedback. They certainly plan to make it a collaborative process. and I think it would, I think the implementation of it would be, certainly a boon to recreational programs for both the borough and the township. And I think, I think the design and technological advancements facilitate what I think would be a pretty well-received installation there. So with that, Mayor, I think that
Thank you.
concludes my reports.
Mr. LaConte, did you have any report?
I do not have any report at the moment.
Okay. Do we want to do Mr. Shadi or Mrs. Cafoni? Who would prefer to go next?
Okay, thank you. I have one item to report on, and that is the pending Open Public Records Act legislation. Oh, I apologize, yes. Yes, thank you. And I just want to summarize, it's pending, it is not adopted yet, but I just want to give a few high-level points of some of the things that the Open Public Records Act proposed legislation proposes that I think are favorable for everybody. I think it's something that is long overdue and makes some great changes to a law based on experience and what's happened over the last 2 decades with the law in existence. Some things that it does: it prohibits the use of the Open Public Records Act for discovery, pending litigation. It safeguards residents' expectation of privacy through an expansion of the exemptions and permissible redactions to documents. It no longer requires a custodian to provide a document in the requested format, medium. It says you don't have to convert it. That took a lot of time and effort from custodians. Now it is, you have to provide it in whatever medium format that you have. Limits immediate access to only records that are under 12 months old. So older documents you don't have to provide immediate access to. It reasonably takes more effort and time to find those documents the older they are. Allows custodians to provide the requester with the website if the requested document is available on a public agency's website. So that is considered to be responding to the request. And it also encourages municipalities to put as much on online as possible, documents online as possible. Prohibits anonymous requesters from filing denial of access complaints. Fines for knowingly and willful violations are no longer personal to the custodian. Establishes a process for the public agency to go to Superior Court for harassing requests. I always said it requires requests government records be made available on public websites to the extent feasible. Prohibits the selling of data obtained by Oprah, which will eliminate a large number of requests. But I think that covers the highlights of what the bill does, the legislation proposes. And again, its main intent is to safeguard reasonable expectations of privacy and limit Oprah requests to reasonable requests for actual documents instead of information.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And just to let residents know, I had asked our attorney to give us some information about the anticipated Oprah changes, or at least what was initially drafted and then pulled back, because it does impact our residents. And I wanted to understand, in case this committee wanted to make a request of our legislators, our state legislators, in terms of any changes that we want to that legislation. So it did get pulled back, and I think that, hopefully they'll strike a balance between transparency and protecting, privacy rights, or protecting the municipality from these massive requests that are more about somebody's commercial interests than about any real discovery type of efforts. So I thank you for providing that. I know there's a lot of maybe a bit of controversy on the topic.
Differing opinions for sure.
Differing opinions, thank you. And the other hot topic, which I
But
mentioned.
hearing that list of things, I mean, some of them are subjective. I mean, if the idea that you can't use it for discovery for a lawsuit, I mean, you might have a legitimate, reason to explore prior to a lawsuit. It seems to be a little bit subjective. And then also to say that you can't use it for harassing, I mean, who is to determine what's harassing? And those are some overreaches that I could see in there. I would like to, speak out against that with the collective voice of this committee, certainly, against things like that, because that puts it in the the administrative state's purview to determine what is harassing or what's not. And, criticism always seems harassing.
Thank you. I guess I would, because I had talked about that, like I said, there could be some simplified version of an ask. But if we have specifics also. So I guess I would ask the committee if there's anything, either from the discussion or from what you learn that you would want for us to include in a resolution and ask to our state legislators in terms of what they can do as they're crafting this Oprah legislation. If you could send that into Mr. Shahadi, and he can coordinate that into a resolution. Okay.
If I may ask, Mayor, if there are, not that there's a time limit, but certainly please send those to me before the workshop meeting, and I can collate them, and then we can put together a draft for the resolution at the workshop, discuss that, and then tee it up for adoption.
Yeah, thank you. And then, like I mentioned in my mayor's message, the affordable housing legislation did pass, and that is very much on our radar. And we, are thinking about whether or not, same thing, to have some asks, either a resolution here and to reach out to our state legislators to see if there can be amendments that for some of the aspects of the legislation that don't make sense. I mean, there wasn't a lot of opportunity for municipalities to give input, for planners to give input. So as we go through and we figure out what's changed, and certainly the timelines are very tight, and you're subject to builder's remedy if you look the wrong way or slip and miss a deadline. So there's definitely going to be some asks. So we're working with our attorney. They're going to give us kind of a synopsis of what's in the legislation, and then we'll think about what that ask might look like for Chatham Township. Great. And Mr. Shahadi.
Mayor, I think the only report, unless there's anything else, but I could speak about the budget. Do you want me to talk about the budget now, or
Sure.
after intro? Or
Did you, well, you know what? Why don't we do it with the intro? Yeah, that
Okay.
makes sense over there.
And I mean, the other stuff, you covered the LoSAP conversation. That was a point. So, is there anything else you'd like me to touch on?
No, we could do it as we go
Okay.
through. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to open the hearing of citizens. Mr. LeConte, can you please provide the guidance around the hearing of citizens?
Members of the public are now welcome to come up to the microphone to address the Township Committee. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to be heard about issues which are not topics scheduled for public hearings tonight. Those present may step up to the microphone to be heard. If you are watching via Zoom, you may speak during any of the public comment sessions by following the Zoom instructions to raise your hand. Whether in person or online, when you're recognized to speak, please mind the following procedures. 1, please say your name, spell your last name, and give the name of your street. You do not need to give your street number. All public comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Rather than use any of your time answering questions, the Township Committee will wait until you finish speaking before responding. There are 2 public comment sessions on tonight's agenda. Each member of the public will be limited to 1 comment of up to 3 minutes during each public comment period. Written comments submitted to the Township Clerk before 3 p.m. today will be read during the public comment sessions. Written comments are subject to the same guidelines as oral comments. Duplicative written comments may be summarized rather than read in full, according to guidelines issued by the New Jersey Division of Local Government Services.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll open it up if anybody wants to come up. Do we have anybody on Zoom? Thank you. Please.
Kathy Abbott, Wynwood Road. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters. There are some concerns about the Oprah bill related to it overreaching, and I don't have all the details, but I will send you the position where I know the League of Municipalities supported the original version, but I think that some of the transparency intentions of the Open Public Records Act that exists now will be taken away by the version that was, in the former bill. So I'll just send so you can be informed, because it was studied by the League of Women Voters in a serious way. Everything that Ms. Cafoni read sounds very smart for the township, but there's some issues for democracy that the League of Women Voters is concerned about.
Thank you.
If I may?
Yes.
If anyone's concerned about this Oprah legislation, I would recommend actually reading the legislation, and you will see that it is largely in line with what was presented by our township attorney.
Okay, seeing no one else at the mic, I will close the public hearing. Okay, so we're going to move on to ordinance 2024-02, floodplain management. Do I need a motion to introduce?
Well, it's already been
Adopt.
introduced.
Or-
Not quite yet. This is the one, we're going to have the public hearing tonight, but
Okay,
the planning board has not yet had their master plan consistency review discussion on this. There were 2 meetings scheduled for this month, both of which were canceled. The planning board we're still within that 35-day window. So if the board's going to deal with that on April 1st, which is still within that window. So once the board has had a chance to discuss that, the township committee can take action. But we would still have the public hearing tonight. We can proceed with that and then
okay,
have adoption or a vote on it at a later meeting.
okay. So we don't need a motion and a second before the public hearing, we'll just jump right into it?
No, in either way, we'd have the public hearing before any motions.
Oh, okay. Okay, in that case, I am opening up the public hearing for 2024-02 floodplain management. I'm just debating if I ask you for a 2-minute synopsis for, I know when we went over it in workshop, I'm just, for residents, I should probably give you a heads up that I.
No, it's fine. I
We've
mean,
got a lot on the agenda, and I'm like, oh.
It's a lengthy ordinance, and I mean, the title that we have on the agenda is abbreviated, but I think also the title does clarify something, so I'll read the title first. And what it says is it's an ordinance amending the Township of Chatham's code to repeal Chapter 30, Article 10, flood damage prevention and flood hazard area regulations, and to adopt a new Chapter 20, Article 10, flood damage prevention and flood hazard area regulations, to adopt flood hazard maps, to designate a floodplain administrator, and providing for severability and an effective date. Essentially, this came about from a review through a land sale or prospective land sale, where there were some inconsistencies found in our flood maps, what some of our regulations are required under FEMA, and this just updates all of that. It was reviewed by folks over at FEMA, prepared by our engineer. It makes sure that our maps and our ordinances are all consistent with each other, and that whatever sort of penalties and remedies might need to be there are there, and it's also in conformance with the DEP requirements as well.
Thank you. So it's really to help us comply with FEMA, so that, yeah.
Yep, and what it does is it ultimately helps homeowners who might be having to pay flood insurance, and ensures that
they can continue to get flood insurance and that the rates make sense in accordance with the guidelines that are, put out by the federal government and the state government. So, nothing that I would say immediately affects people, but it's making sure that all of our ordinances are up to date, because state regulations, federal regulations change, and sometimes our local ordinances don't follow that as quickly as they should, or until an issue is brought to our attention, and that's what happened here.
Thank you.
Yep.
You passed the test, that was very good. Okay, so our public hearing is open for that ordinance 2024-02, and nobody online?
No hands raised?
Okay, then we will, and nobody's here, so we will close the public hearing, and we will,
We can revisit this at the April 23rd meeting.
okay, thank you. And the next is ordinance 2024-03, movie theater inspections. And we're gonna open the public hearing for that one. Mr. LaConte, could you give like 30-second summary of what this one is?
Yeah, real quick, it's a housekeeping ordinance that takes away the requirement for the building inspector to do an inspection of a movie theater before the license is issued. This is keeping it in line with the UCC. Under UCC, the building inspector can only do an inspection when there's a permit, an open permit. The ordinance will still require that the statutory fire inspection be done before the license is issued. And separate from this requirement, there are health inspections for the snack bar and such. So we will still have other inspections. We're just taking away the one that's technically not allowed under UCC. And the requirement dates back to, I think, 1972 and was superseded. So we're just catching up with statutes.
Great, thank you. So the public hearing for that ordinance is open. Do we have anybody online? Okay, then I will close the public hearing. Do we have a motion to adopt ordinance 2024-03?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Can we get a roll call, please?
Mr. Lois?
Aye.
Mr. McHugh?
Yes.
Mrs. Rowland?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Troy?
Yes.
Mayor Ewald?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, we'll move on to the introduction of ordinances. Ordinance 2024-04, the Cap Bank ordinance. Can I get a motion to introduce?
So moved.
And can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Shoddy, do you want to give a little brief overview of this Cap Bank ordinance?
Sure. This ordinance is largely a procedural ordinance. It's not changing much for the budget this year. We haven't had to use it. We didn't use it this year. What it's doing is the state has has caps for appropriations and levies. The appropriations is how much the township is anticipating to spend. The levy is how much the township is anticipating to raise. There are caps on both that have been instituted by the state. What we're talking about today is the appropriation cap, which is capped to 2.5% annually every year by the state. However, there is an allowance to allow that to go up to 3.5% if approved by the Township Committee. This ordinance does two things. It increases the cap, and it also allows you to bank what is not used. So what we're doing here is increasing the cap, but also banking all that because we don't need to use it. We're well within. So this ensures that in the future, there is a cap bank available for appropriations should there be unforeseen circumstances, emergencies, anything that necessitates having to increase appropriations above that 2.5%. Just because appropriations are going up or potentially going above to 2.5 or 3.5 or even using the cap bank, what's banked, it does not necessarily mean that the levy is going to increase. That's because the appropriations are then offset by revenues. So you may have more revenues that offset that appropriation, and then therefore, and as well as your tax base. So therefore, you could still have a situation, as we have had and is existing here, where you, I'm sorry, not happening this year, where you increase your appropriations above that amount, but keep the taxes flat, or, have the levy still be less than the 2.5 or the 3.5%, because the levy is still capped as well.
Okay,
So what we're doing here is just increasing that cap because the state allows us to do it, and if we increase it, it allows us to bank that.
okay, thank you. Any-
And just so I'm clear, Alderman, it's not a pool of money that exists, so nobody thinks that this is just cash that's being squirreled away. It's literally just paper, it's just on paper.
Authorization,
It's just an authorization.
yeah. Okay. Any discussion, any questions?
Well, every year I have opposed the cap bank ordinance, and it's for a very simple reason. Appropriations, which is spending, always is the way and the reason why taxes continue to go up. And I think the cap, which it's a great explanation here, the cap and the bank being separate, we could vote on just the cap or just the bank. We don't need both. And the idea that we're authorizing to go to 3.5% from 2.5% cap, I think those caps were put in place for a very good reason, which is to control spending on the local level, which wasn't being done. These laws date back to the 70s. New Jersey hasn't significantly improved, and I don't think that we're doing ourselves a favor by continuing to pass the cap bank. It is true that many communities pass this. It's also true that it doesn't necessarily lead immediately to a tax increase, but it does allow the flexibility to change the budget more than you possibly could otherwise, which inevitably, and by change I mean spend more. So it's not something that's beneficial. It's to the public because it's going to lead to higher taxes. And as we've seen, I mean, we saw the cap bank in its full effect when we had 20% municipal tax increases in this town, not in the period of 2020 and 2021. So it's not like it's ancient history that I'm talking about. If you had a long sustained period, 10 years or so, of no tax increases or 0% tax increases, that doesn't mean that, as has been explained, that doesn't mean that the township is not receiving more and more and more revenue, whether it be from taxable sources and others. But because as the assessed values, as improvements, as people's homes, as different structures, businesses, whatnot, pay more in taxes just based on their assessed value as the assessed values go up. So, we have a natural rise that's built, and if you look at it in Chatham Township, it turns out to be about 1.5%, 2% every year, and then we get a 2.5% cap, and we're kind of authorizing ourselves to go to 3.5 in spending, and then additionally, and this is a bigger problem with it is, the only reason we really pass this is because we don't want to go to the public. I mean, if we went right to the public, and the argument being that, well, we're going to the public now. The ordinance is out there. But what's going to happen is we create this bank. The bank gets bigger and bigger. And then at some point in the future, someone can really crank the spending up. And that's what I'm not in favor of that. I don't think that's good for the public. And I think that to exclude the public from that decision, because normally you could crank the spending way up. You could have appropriations. Not that we're doing that in this budget, but this is setting it up for next year or the year after or the year after that. By passing this now, we're just excluding the public because you could have these increases if you just took it to a referendum. And then the last thing I'll say is that the number of exclusions is enormous. Emergencies is one of the exclusions. Capital spending are the exclusions. The list of exclusions in the statute is enormous. There are things that are statutorily outside the cap entirely, and then what is inside the cap has exclusions, and also there's things that are inside the cap like healthcare, which naturally has 4.5%, which is even beyond this 3.5%. So I truly think this is completely unnecessary. I've spoken about it every year, and I just thank you for listening this year, as I expect we'll have the same outcome as we have had in years past, but I don't believe this is necessary.
Does anybody else have any comments, questions?
Yeah, Committeeman Lowen, I would share your concern about sort of runaway banking, but I am more than adequately comforted by the notion, correct me if I'm wrong, that the bank burns off every 3 years. So it's not as though we are entitled to bank in perpetuity, build a forever increasing conceptual war chest. Again, it's not actual cash, it's just it's an authorization more than anything else. So the fact that it burns off every 3 years, there is a internally self-controlled mechanism to the cap bank. I think my perspective on it is it's a zero-cost option to afford you yet another financial tool to manage the budget. I think the concern you have, and it certainly could be concern if I believe that there were to be nefarious individuals here on the committee who are looking to unscrupulously spend the taxpayers' money. I'd like to believe, and I certainly have seen evidence thus far, that I think everyone has a proper stewardship hat on and looking to spend wisely. At the end of the day, there are a multitude of services and requirements that must be delivered to the constituents, and it's our obligation to judiciously, disperse those funds and make sure that those services are in fact delivered. So, again, it's a tool that can be used or could not be used, and good Lord willing, we don't need to use it. But I think there's been instances where charges trickle down to the municipality from the county or the state that are unforeseen. And good Lord willing, we have an ability to absorb some, if not all, of the burden. And to the extent that anything does change, I think there is, again, an internal mechanism whereby we do go to the public every time we need to take action. And that's the whole point of us sitting on the dais and passing resolutions and ordinances. So I think I'd like to believe that the process herein and elsewhere in any municipal governance setting that we are putting these things before our constituents and advocating and challenging as we should be.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for directly invoking me there.
I'm sorry.
Well, I was
What's that?
invoked by
Steve,
name.
I heard that, I didn't hear your name, but I would love to get comments from the rest of the, did you invoke his name? I didn't hear that. I would like
As
to
he
get
began,
comments.
yeah. So I'll make it very quick. I'll just say that spending wisely, absolutely, we'd love to think that every member of this committee would spend wisely, and I'm sure whoever's voted for tax increases of 20% in the past did think that they were spending wisely, but those, it's not meant to invoke aspersion or to cast aspersions. I'm not trying to invoke, blame, but I'm sure they thought they were spending wisely. I think equally the people in the 70s who came up with these caps came up for a reason. They didn't come up with them to cast aspersions on all local committees and local governance. They came up with these caps because they thought that it was reasonable. So I think the laws that were passed at those time, I'm not going to judge that and say, those caps were unreasonable. And you have to come to that conclusion. And then as far as the point of, in order to think the cap's good, and then as far as the point of the burning off, it is an average. It is a bank that's rolling for 3 years, but it never burns off. It doesn't go to zero unless the bank doesn't pass. So it doesn't burn off to zero, and I'm not saying that you were saying that. I just feel that that could be misconstrued from your statement. Thank you.
Any other comments? Mr. Shoddy, again, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I believe, I'm not fully familiar with this, but if this is an opportunity to have some funds available if we need it, because you can create the best budget in the world, but it's only as good as that day, because you can't foresee what's going to happen. And I've created thousands of budgets over the years, and the budget is never equal to the actual at the end of the financial period. So if there's things that come up that we you know, to your point, that we haven't planned for, that are unforeseen, then why wouldn't we be able to have this tool available on paper without us having to spend? I mean, I guess that's why there's a committee, that we can vote on things to decide how we use the money and what we do with our money and our budget and our 11,000 constituents. So I think, you know, having something to cover unforeseen circumstances, which is always the case, I don't see a downside to that.
Thank you. I feel bad putting you on the spot, and if you don't know the answer, would you happen to recall how much of the budget is within the cap? The appropriations cap?
While I do that, Mayor, I just want to know also, I mean, just as whoever thought it was wise to make it 2.5, and that's what we're resting our laurels on, is the legislature felt that 2.5 was okay, they also allowed it to go up to 3.5. So in that same wisdom, they provided for that, and things have changed since the 70s. There's a lot that's changed, a lot more mandates, a lot more, you know, and when you try to squeeze everything into that operating budget, you know, then what ends up especially if you're limited to just say 2.5, now you're forced to say, okay, well, what can I pull out of here that might have been a capital expense, like purchases of vehicles or whatever, and now shift them over to borrowing. So at the end of the day, it still results in that tax increase, but when you're adding the interest and compounding that, it just creates a bigger problem rather than just saying, you know what, let's increase it this $100,000, you know, increase that cap $100,000 or whatever it is to buy that vehicle rather than borrow and pay $200,000 for that same thing. You know, so it's a tool, and I will note that last year, my first year drafting the budget, and this year, you know, we started to replenish and bring back this idea of this cap bank, and we haven't used it. So, you know, the idea that it's a horrible thing, we haven't needed it, and so I think for this year, you look at here, our appropriation cap is somewhere around 433 under the appropriation cap.
I'm sorry.
About $433,000 under the appropriation cap.
Okay, for this year, but what was, oh, that's it?
What do you mean? I'm sorry.
What was what was the budget that fell within the appropriation? So the budget
Oh,
was like 17
our total
million?
appropriations, I'm sorry, so total appropriations are gonna be, not including the library, I have that, let me give that to you for a second.
But does that all fall within the cap?
No, there are some things that fall outside of the cap, it's a very complicated
Yeah, that's what I was trying to remember
spreadsheet
what that
for the
number, so if the
state.
budget's like 17 million, was the inside the cap like 12 million?
Correct, I
Okay.
can tell
I
you
think it's like
that
10.
here.
That's what I was trying to remember. I mean, it's still a big chunk of change was the point that I was trying to make.
Correct, so, amount on which the cap is applied this year is about 13 million.
Okay. Okay, so it's a large part of the budget. I want to make sure residents are clear on one point. The committee who uses those funds will be held accountable for using those funds. So, you know, Mr., I will not invoke his name, because apparently that extends the discussion. But there's discussion about increases. Those increases were largely tied to affordable housing. I'm not even sure if the cap was used at that point. Residents understand that and seem comfortable with the decisions that were made related to affordable housing. So, you know, if the cap was used, that would be an example of a place where, you know, we needed extra authority. But the committee that's in place that makes that decision, we're just giving them room. They have to decide if they're going to use it. So next year's committee, the committee after, decides if they use it, and they are held accountable for that decision. And I would hope they would be able to justify that decision. We're just giving them the room to breathe, should they need that. Okay, so I think we've heard from everybody. I would ask for a vote on the introduction of the cap bank ordinance, please.
Mr. Lewis?
Nay.
Mr. McHugh?
Yes.
Mrs. Rowland?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Choi?
Yes.
Mayor Ewald?
Yes,
Motion passes. Public hearing will be on April 23rd.
thank you. Okay, we're going to introduce ordinance 2024-05, repealing the Harding Emergency Dispatch Contract Ordinance, which is basically a stale ordinance that doesn't exist. And I will summarize it very quickly that way. No need to, unless you wanted to say something.
No,
Mr.
it's
McConkey.
just another housekeeping like the one before.
Thank you. Okay. Do I have a motion to introduce ordinance 2024-05? Do
So moved?
I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Can we get a vote, please?
Mr. Lois?
Yes.
Mr. McHugh?
Yes.
Mrs. Rowland?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Choi?
Yes.
Mayor Ewald?
Yes.
Motion passes. Public hearing April 23rd.
Thank you. Ordinance 2024-06, mid-block crosswalks. Do I have a motion to introduce?
So moved.
Second?
Thank you. Do you want to brief? Yes.
I
Ms.
can give a
Coney.
brief summary on that.
Thank you.
That is to align our ordinances with the existing mid-block crosswalks that exist. This was reviewed by the chief of police and the township engineer, and this is not adding mid-block crosswalks. It's just codifying the ones that exist. One note, I see a typo here for Woodland Road. That is Dodge Drive, not Didge Drive. There's an I instead of an O. So I just wanted to make that, and I will be providing the clerk with the corrected ordinance for that. But, so that's what the three existing mid-block crosswalks will be in the code.
Thank you. Do we have any discussion? Okay. Can we get a vote, please?
Mr. Lois?
Yes.
Mr. McHugh?
Yes.
Mrs. Rowland?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Choi?
Yes.
Mayor Ewald?
Yes.
Motion passes, and public hearing on April 23rd.
Okay. We have 2024-07, bond ordinance for property acquisition. Do I have a motion to introduce?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Mr. Shoddy, could you, or Ms. Cafoni, give the little brief introduction on this one?
You got it. So this is the bond ordinance to authorize the issuance of $419,000 bonds to fund a portion of the $790,000 purchase price for 441 Southern Boulevard by the municipality. The remaining portion is going to be funded by a Morris County grant through the Trust for Public Land. In
Thank
the
you.
amount of $350,000.
Okay. And I did mention this in my, the opening mayor's message. Thank you. Do we have any discussion? Can I get a vote, please?
Mr. Lois?
Yes.
Mr. McHugh?
Yes.
Mrs. Rowland?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Choi?
Yes.
And Mayor Ewald?
Yes.
Motion passes. And the public hearing for this one will be April 9th.
And then 2024-08, authorizing property acquisition. Can I get a motion to introduce?
So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. And this is the related property acquisition ordinance, correct?
Yes.
Anything else about this one besides the fact that it's the related property acquisition ordinance?
That's
Okay.
it. That
Thank
sums it
you.
up.
Just, again, I know it's been said, but to emphasize that the public hearing and the adoption, I think the clerk mentioned it, and so it's unusual that we will take action at a workshop meeting, but I just want to note that for the public.
Thank you for clarifying. Yeah, so just so everybody's aware, the public hearing and the adoption would be at our workshop. We don't usually take action during workshops, so if you're interested in learning more or saying something, you'd need to come to our next meeting on April 9th. Thank you.
And the reason for that, Mayor, also to clarify, is because we are under deadline by the county for this grant, and so that's why we want to move as quickly as possible.
Great. Thank you. Any discussion? Can I get a vote, please?
Mr. Lois?
Yes.
Mr. McHugh?
Yes.
Mrs. Rowland?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Choi?
Yes.
Mayor Ewald?
Yes.
Motion passes. Public hearing April 9th.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Shahadi, you're up. Resolution 2024-079, introducing year 2024 municipal budget. Do I need, should I do a motion?
Yeah, Karen, do the motion first.
Okay. Can I get a
Parliamentary
motion to
issue.
introduce 2024-079?
What's adopting the resolution to introduce the budget?
It's a slight
Okay.
technicality because it's a resolution acting like an ordinance, so yes, it's adopting the resolution to introduce the budget.
Okay. what he said. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. Now you're up, Mr. Shahadi.
Thank you, Mayor. So I do just want to provide an abbreviated presentation. There is a full presentation that was provided at the workshop meeting, the earlier workshop meeting this month. I do want to note, though, that there are a number of corrections, nothing substantial that's going to affect the bottom line, which is the tax rate. Just in the presentation, the one that I put up on the computer did not take some of the changes that I had saved on another computer. This one does, and I will publish the corrected version on the website as well. But again, to note, the bottom line is still the same, and I'll go over that. So first, I do want to recognize the Finance Subcommittee of the Township Committee. That was the Deputy Mayor and the Committee Woman. I want to thank you both for all your hard work on this. The theme for this budget, I called it Securing the Future, and that's because what this budget does is really just that. It ensures a prosperous and financially stable future for the township, and I'll highlight those a little bit later on. I think it's important to emphasize this slide. It's in almost every slide or tax bill mailing that every municipality puts out, and that's the breakdown of where your tax dollars go. The highlight here is that what you control, what I put together in this budget with the help of our CFO and the Finance Committee, is just 17% of your tax bill. That's all that we're talking about here. The rest of it is controlled by, and as the Deputy Mayor mentioned, the school budget, for example, they were what, in the 70 million or so, I think you mentioned? 70, 80 million was the school budget you mentioned, right? We're talking about 17, 91 million, right? We're talking about a significantly less, a smaller number than that. We only deal with 17% or 17 cents of every dollar that the taxpayers pay. And so what does that look like? For 2024, our total municipal purposes appropriations, that's just the spending here in the township, and that does not include the library mandate for what we collect for the library, is 18 million, I gotta pull it up on here because it's hard to read over there. It's $18,067,643. Compare that to last year at 17.2, and in 2022 at just shy of 17 million. So where do we offset the amount we're raising by taxes? That's through revenue, whether it's grants, whether it's fees, fines, a whole number of things. That's about 6.8 million. So we have to raise the balance of that by taxes. That's 11.2 million. And we take that across our net valuation taxable, or the tax base, and that takes us to a rounded tax rate of about 0.32, which is consistent with what it's been the years prior, 2023 and 2022. So because of that, residents should not see an increase in their municipal purposes tax rate. All of that money that we're spending on, that is appropriated, that's to spend on the following services, and it is a long list of services that we provide, and some residents aren't aware that even things like the street lighting that you see, we pay for that, and we also include in there subsidies for our fire department, our EMS, and even our senior center. And the fire hydrants as well. That's another expense that some people don't realize that we pay for. The movers and shakers, as I like to call it, the notables, right, break it down here into five big things, but there's also the sixth one, which is the capital improvement fund. The biggest one is about 1.5 million, almost 1.6 million in pensions and Social Security. That's a 9% increase over the previous year. 1.7 million. That's an increase over the previous year, where it was about 1.6. That's a $140,000 increase. Our debt payments this year is about 1.45 million compared to 1.32. That's a 10% increase. And then our emergency response and public safety, that's our biggest ticket item, everything from police, fire, dispatch, you name it. That's about 3.8 this year. That's a $73,000 increase. And then insurances, that's health and liability, health for the employees and retirees, and our liability insurance, property, casualty, making sure parks, the vehicles, everything's insured. That's a large item of about 2.7 million. And then finally, public works, everything from the parks, the roads, all kinds of maintenance throughout town, the buildings and grounds, the snow removal. That's a 1% increase over last year. And then finally, our capital improvement fund. That is probably the largest it's been in a number of years at $900,000. What that does is it reduces the amount that we have to borrow. So by bumping this up, 95,000 over last year to take it to 900,000, what that does is ensures that's $95,000 less that we have to borrow, but overall $900,000 less that we have to borrow that we can put into things like what we have planned and what we have received requests for, things like our fire trucks, things like the buildings, things like our affordable housing mandates. That's all coming out of the capital improvement fund, and what we can't afford then goes to borrowing. But the subtotal of those line items is $13,107,585. That's just about a 4% increase on those big ticket items. And when you look at our total appropriations, that 18 million number, that's an increase of 800,000 over last year. So 500,000 of that is just those 6 items right there. That's more than half of that increase. And the remainder of it is 303,000 that went up: utilities, fuel, electricity, and in a lot of areas in the township, departmental spending was either flat or even went down. So kudos to the department heads for doing a great job. And I want to point to our surplus. If you look at the 2024 column here on our surplus, we've grown it to a very healthy level, which is within best practices. It's within guidelines for fund balance policies, keeping us between that 10 and 15% total expenditures. And we're using about 3.5 million of that to offset and reduce how much we have to levy by way of taxes. But that, when I refer to securing the future, this is one area where I'm referring to here. We expect that we'll have a balance of our surplus, or what we call a fund balance, of about 2.3 at the end of the year, which helps us to make sure that interest rates are low, that we have good credit rating, and that we can meet any of our obligations, also be prepared in case there's any emergencies. Last year, for example, health insurance went up 26%. So had it not been for a surplus like this, then taxpayers are the ones that have to pay for that in that particular year. Overall, the summary here is that we've kept the tax rate flat, we've maintained services, we haven't cut any services, we've improved our fund balance, and we've got capital improvements that are going to continue this year. Much needed improvements, and a lot of it goes to essential services like public safety.
Great, thank you. Do we have any discussion?
I have one or two quick comments, questions.
Okay.
When I came on the committee, a lot of my semantics had to change from everyday business and day accounting to municipal accounting. And so just for the benefit of the public, because it took me a while to get over, the word surplus is something that might be misleading. And so for the benefit of the public, Mr. Shoddy, can you explain what the surplus really is?
Sure. I can go in a lot of detail.
No, a summary.
Yeah, so it's commonly known as a surplus, but what we refer to it as is a fund balance. And so whatever is not spent in a given year, right, eventually rolls over into that fund balance. And it doesn't happen immediately. Whatever we don't spend, let's say in the 2024 budget, it goes into a reserve budget, and then after the reserve budget is when it goes into the fund balance. And so there's almost like a 2-year lag before it finally hits that fund balance. What that fund balance is used for ultimately is you look at how much can we use for revenue, but it's constantly a cyclical replenishment, right? Things like your reserve for uncollected taxes, or if you are doing better in terms of bidding, right? Let's say you put in, we're going to budget $200,000 for a contract, but it comes in less. That money is what goes into the surplus. And it helps to, as I mentioned before, helps to keep your interest rates low, because the better your credit rating is, agencies and banks, whoever you're going to be borrowing for, looks at that, and they want to make sure that you have a healthy fund balance to be able to pay those obligations, but also ensure your long-term financial security.
Thank you. I think that's helpful, not just to me, but to many others. I also had one other question, and one
It's
of
not
the-
a slush fund.
No, okay, that's,
Not, I think it's always important
Well,
to say.
that's
whenever
what I
people
mean
see-
semantically,
yes,
what some
think,
people
"Oh,
might
They're
understand."
just sitting on this money. It's constantly a cycle. How we're using some of it and we replenish it.
right, the diligence of your actions and the Finance Committee and based upon the state law and how to put together a budget. I think it's an important distinction, and many may be very clear on that, but some may not. And I think it's just a word choice that might be confusing to some.
And this chart is also helpful for people to see. I mean, you look at 2019, that fund balance after budget adoption was almost 980. In 2020, it went down to almost 490. And the pandemic had a lot to do with it. We can't predict these emergencies. So we want to make sure that we've got a healthy surplus, not only to deal with the budget realities of that given year, but also any surprise that may come up after budget adoption.
Thank you. I have one other question. This is just, actually doesn't appear here on the overall, but is something that I would ask for you to be clear on. Something close to my heart, and that is a separate line item and separate out of the budget is what is supported for the library, right? And there's a calculation to that. And my understanding is by semantically 1/3 mil type of calculation. Is that the amount, which is the minimum amount required by law, is that the minimum amount that we allocate for support of the library, or do we have a different number?
A great question. So in most municipalities that have their own library, kind of just on their own, the minimum is that. It's 1/3 of a mil of your, essentially your tax base, and is what they come up with. Here in Chatham, because we have a joint library, there's another formula that's used, so it does end up being a little bit more than that, but that's essentially how it works out.
Thank you.
Is it more? I think in the past it was less.
I'll confirm that, but I believe this year
It's more in the sense
little
that it's
bit
more
more.
complicated, but it's slightly less in its amount.
In the dollar amount,
Yeah,
yeah. So
right.
if we had our own library and paid the 1/3 of a mil, let's say it would be 1,100,000, but because of the allocation, the way that's
There's an
calculated.
allocation formula, correct?
Yeah, between us and the borough, it comes out a little less than that 1,100,000. That's, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and that may have changed also due to their reevaluation, which makes it much more complicated, because we haven't revaled, so,
Yeah,
anyway.
okay,
I do have a few comments.
oh, okay.
Okay. I think the municipal budget is very good. I'd like to, just say that the Finance Committee did a great job with it. I do have some concerns, mostly around capital projects, because those often drive debt. And I did see there is an extensive list, and I know we're going to have more discussion about capital in the future, but there is an extensive list in there of capital requirements. There always is, right? So there's always places to drive capital. I have a few suggestions that total $323,000. It's exactly $323,000, which I would like to see driven directly down to capital projects, and it's very short. But I'll just start with saying, I think the Finance Committee, you guys took on a suggestion that I made in May 9th of last year, which was about the utilities, leading to $117,000 in savings over last year's spend. So in other words, we're $117,000 lower than was previously budgeted. So that's a savings on utilities. So that's obviously going to go right down to the bottom line. That's wonderful. We are folding in an unexpended capital ordinance. I talked about those, ad nauseum all throughout last year. So capital ordinance 2022-16 is $303,000. So that's wonderful. Another thing I talked about on March 7th of last year and many other times, but was the reserve of uncollected taxes, pushing that up a little bit. And I think just for the benefit of the public, we have a 99.5% tax collection rate in Chatham Township, and we have historically had a 97.5% reserve for uncollected taxes. The state statute, allows us to have a RUT as high as the 3-year average of our collection. And so we could set the rut quite high. We went this year from 97.5% of the rut, this reserve, to 98%. That 0.5% is going to add $127,000 to this budget over last year. So you put those things together and you got $500,000. So that was great that you implemented all of those things, pushed that into this budget. I would say it's the most amazing thing to me is with the rut, the amount of pushback that I got about talking about the rut last year and in years past, is that it took a lot of courage to increase the rut from 97.5 to 98%. But given that in the Great Recession, during the pandemic, during the housing downturn, we've never had a tax collection rate that's dipped below that 99%, high 98%. I would encourage this committee just, take another 0.5% walk towards what we're allowed to, what the maximum we're allowed to. If we did that, we'd put another $127,000 back into the budget. You could kick that straight down to capital. Another thing that I saw in the budget here is we are budgeting interest at $350,000. So in other words, interest that we collect, it's paid to us in interest on investments. We know that last year in 2023 we collected $453,000. We collected $453,000. So, but we're budgeting $350,000. Now we haven't worked on a better cash management plan. Everybody knows I've been talking about cash management plan. So to say like last year, we know we can have a better cash management plan. We know that. We know that interest rates are higher now than they were last year, especially if you average across all of last year, right? The rates were on their way up. Rates have somewhat stabilized, in my opinion, or what we see in the banking world. So I think hitting the bar of 453,000, so hitting last year's number, what we actually realized last year, is a great, that would be a great way to just set it. I think it's conservative. I think it's doable. I think our managers can absolutely hit that. I think they can do it. So we're at $350,000 budgeted. If we went to 453, that's even without our cash management plan. We know we need a better one. We know that could really, well, at least from what I've put together, we could increase interest as much as 75% with that better cash management plan. But even excluding that, if we just use last year's realized interest, we put another $153,000 back into the budget. So between interest and the reserve, you're talking about 103,000 and 127,000. So that puts us at, that's a $230,000 bump. And then the last thing I'd ask that this committee look at is legal fees before final adoption. In the 2023 budget, the 2023 year rather, the actual spend was $152,000. And I'm sure that our current municipal attorney, Ms. Cafoni, will be just as diligent as the outgoing previous attorney in watching over that budget. Previously our municipal attorney really acted as a law director, specializing and pushing work out, to the best possible person in that field or to those who are authorized in our pool. We are budgeting $245,000, but last year we spent $152 in legal fees. So that's a $93,000 jump. So if we simply budget legal fees at the same amount that they were last year, and you add that to the interest and the RUT, you could realize, by my calculation here, $323,000 in additional money. That's almost 3% of the municipal budget in terms of its portion of municipal tax revenue. So the $11 million or so of municipal tax revenue. If we $323,000 would be a very considerable portion to push towards our capital projects. And currently, although it's subject to change, we have several $1 million in capital projects and only several $100,000 in actual down payment. So I think that $323,000, which would be almost 30% more, could really go a long way in that portion of the budget.
Okay. Do I have any? Well, let's see if anybody on the committee, does anybody have any input, any questions? Well, let's go back a second. Any other questions in general or comments about the budget?
Can you confirm, was the rut changed? I thought it was left.
We did end up making a change on the RUT because of the, largely capital adjustments, but also, I want to go back to the slide as I was talking about surplus, right? The fund balance. It's all cyclical. It's whatever you put in the RUT, if you don't use it, ends up going back
drops
to
to
the
the
fund
bottom.
balance, right? So, you know, going in the direction of increasing that percentage has the effect of decreasing the amount that will eventually replenish the fund balance. The only reason we went to 98 as opposed to 97.7, whatever it was before, was because if you see here, our fund balance, after we were able to finalize those numbers, went up to 5.8 million. So that gave us the comfort in knowing that we can start to make that adjustment. You look at the numbers before that, they weren't trending so well. And so based off of this, that minor change in the RUT has the effect of potentially, in the future, decreasing the amount that the surplus is going to be replenished by, but enough such that we've offset that in this year's numbers where we know that we'll easily make that up and will not put us below what we should be in terms of our fund balance. So I would not feel comfortable changing that above 98, but that's why it was changed after we finalized the surplus numbers from that 97 point whatever figure to that rounded 98%.
So the 1,357,000 reflects 98%, 98 rut.
I'm sorry, say that again?
1,357,000, sheet 29.
Oh, the total amount?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
And part of the RUT is that if we're not collecting in, we still have to pay the school
Correct.
district, we still
The
have to
county.
pay the county,
The library,
the library. But
Yep.
so we take the hit,
correct,
and that's part of why we're conservative and where we set our RUT.
correct. And it's all, again, a cash flow issue too, when the timing of when that money comes in, how much of it's gonna come in at what quarter, and what we have to pay out at different times of the year.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you when revenues were dwindling and they started dipping into the surplus, and then you didn't have enough surplus to dip into anymore, you know, that's when we were, and that's where we were dealing with the COVID. We were dealing with affordable housing. It was just not a good place to be in, and then you go to the increases that had to take place at that point. So I'm not really keen on raising the RUT any further than where it's been raised. In terms of setting the interest, I mean, I think it just really, it comes down to what you were talking about, is you're kind of taking a conservative approach, and then depending on how the year goes, it comes into surplus and that affects, and we know we're gonna get harder hit next year. So in some ways, you're kind of planning for the replenishment of that surplus, so you can we're using 3.5 million of surplus in the budget. That's a big chunk of the budget is coming from surplus. So if you're not replenishing that, then that's coming from taxpayers.
And they already spoke, the governor spoke and notified the legislature that health benefits are going to be facing another massive increase most likely next year. So, you know, we try to forecast these things. On the topic of interest rates, you know, why we were able to bump that up also is because our CFO and I have been meeting with banks, and our existing bank, TD, gave us a great interest rate. They were able to bump up our interest rate, and you know, that is reflected in our revenue amount. But again, if you get close and you fall short, as unfortunately happens in some cases, despite the best of your planning, for example, you know, last year we looked at historical numbers for revenue with the construction department, right? And they were less than expected, then you're dipping into your fund balance to make up that shortfall. So conservatively, you know, we acknowledge that we're gonna put in more money in the 2024 anticipated revenue line item for interest than we did the previous year, but still a little less than what we realized, because again, you never know what might happen with interest rates. We know what we're getting, and that's gonna be locked in for just a few months, but it can always change. And we don't want to be in a situation where we have a significant shortfall that we have to dip into the surplus even more.
Okay. Any other comments, new comments?
Oh, and I just want to, I mean, one of the reasons also legal is much higher this year is because we anticipated negotiations for affordable housing this year. That was a big one, that did not, that didn't need much last year. Our Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the revenues are not meeting what they were originally projected to meet. And so if they don't come out of that Affordable Housing Trust Fund, then they have to come out of the operating budget. And so that is the largest driver of why the legal expenses went up this year, is because of affordable housing in the next round of negotiations.
Okay, thank you. Okay, can we move to a vote for the formal introduction of the budget, I believe is.
Mr. Lewis?
I will vote to introduce. I hope this committee takes heed to modify the budget.
Mr. McHugh?
Yes.
Mrs. Rowland?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Choi?
Yes.
And Mayor Ewald?
Yes,
Motion passes, and then on April 23rd, we'll have the public hearing and a resolution to adopt the budget.
okay. Moving on to 2024-80, budget self-examination. Can I have a motion to introduce,
To adopt.
to adopt the resolution? Okay,
So moved.
can I get a second?
I'll second.
Does this need any kind of discussion or brief, in terms of how this fits? Yeah.
No, no, I mean, this is one of those procedural resolutions. Municipalities are on a cycle of essentially when you have to submit your budget to the state for their review and go through a whole lengthy process. And then sometimes as long as you meet certain requirements, then you could just do what's known as a self-exam if you're out of that cycle, and that's what this is.
Great.
I think
Thank
this
you.
is year 2 of 3, and next year will be state review.
Thank you. Okay, any discussion? Can we get a vote, please?
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. McHugh?
Yes.
Mrs. Rowland?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Choi?
Yes.
And Mayor Ewald?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, we're moving on to the consent agenda. Does anybody want to pull anything out of the consent agenda for discussion?
Yes, I need to pull 2, 3, and 9.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended with items 2, 3, and 9 taken out?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. McHugh?
Yes.
Mrs. Rowland?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Choi?
Yes.
And Mayor Ewald?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Okay, before we move on, I just wanted to mention, our emergency squad president is here, and we did just approve that LoSAP increase, so I just wanted to make you aware. And I want to thank you and the whole squad for your service, and I'm so thrilled we could do this for you. Okay, so Resolution 2024-082, approving minutes of the meeting. Can I get a motion to approve?
I'll make
Do I
such a
still need a
motion.
motion a second, right?
Yeah.
And can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion.
None.
Did you pull that one out?
Yeah, I need to abstain from both of these. 'Cause
Mr. Lewis was absent.
I was absent from one of the meetings, and the form of the resolution,
Okay, thank
Pat's got
you.
all together.
Great, can I get a vote in that case?
You could
This-
do 82 and
This is
83
for the
if you want.
consent?
Yeah,
Mayor
let's
Ewald?
do,
Is this for
A
the
consent for the.
this is, oh, I just lost track of what I was doing. Did
Yeah.
we already approve the
Yes.
We approved the consent agenda, now we're voting on
Well, we could do
resolution
2 and
082 and 083. Okay, so Mr. Lewis,
Abstain.
Mr. McHugh,
Yes.
Mrs. Rowland,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Choi,
Yes.
and Mayor Ewald.
Yes.
Motion passes.
So do we do 82 and 83 together, or do I have to do?
Yeah, they were together.
Thank you.
That's how I understood the motion.
Okay, great.
And now we're at
Um,
089.
And then Resolution 2024-089, reaffirming adoption of idle-free zones. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion?
And this is one of the resolutions for the certification, or the Sustainable Jersey recertification process.
Thank you.
Yep, and this is just a reaffirmation of a previous resolution, but I guess we're 17 years later or so, and none of the facts have really been updated. So it's an idle, and, I mean, cars have, automatic shut-off at this point, auto start, electric cars. I mean, it just seems to me, if we're going to pass it as a resolution, it should be accurate. Because it's based on CAFE standards from whatever that is, 18 years ago or 17 years ago.
It's been a while since I read this, so I'm trying to remember. And there was nothing that really stood out to me. Is there anything that you,
I certainly don't object to the concept of it. It just seems to me factually inaccurate, because it's based on 2007 numbers.
Well, you have the automatic shutout and the electric vehicles, et cetera, that aren't going to idle anyway, so they're in compliance. It's the old diesel and certainly the other gasoline engines that don't have that.
Right.
There's
No,
a
but
few
I
of them
mean,
out there.
I'm sorry, all of our whereas, statements are, that it's sort of like fear mongering, because it's just, it's not accurate.
so I guess I'm trying to understand, what would you edit specifically, just so we know if we want to modify?
Oh, sure, let me pull the,
Because we can still pass it with edits. I mean, we could take out, I don't know if it's 25% of New Jersey school-age children are asthmatic. I don't know that we need that statistic in there.
yeah, it's exactly things like that, of that nature, so.
Yeah, you think so? Probably. I don't think that's going to lessen the, for New Jersey sustainability. I mean, we could take, that one we could take out, the statistic that's in there.
Yeah.
The parentheses or the entire whereas?
Just the parentheses, the statistic.
Yeah, that and the average car produces 20 pounds of carbon dioxide. I mean, that can't be accurate.
Where is that one?
It's
Right
just
below
the
it.
next whereas and the third whereas, it's.
And I'm sure we'll way past 20 million diesel.
Yeah.
I don't recall if there was any time frame on when this resolution needed to be adopted by for Sustainable Jersey, but perhaps we should have the Environmental Commission do some research to update these whereases.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the time constraint. I'm thinking maybe we not worry about the details and go ahead and prove it because everybody agrees with the concept, and then we could always ask them to adjust it after the fact. Why don't we do that? Because I'm not gonna start looking up whether or not it produces 20 pounds of carbon dioxide or 18 pounds of carbon dioxide at this point.
Why don't we just strike all the whereases and just, we'll start with the first one and support to the adoption of 2012 and the first and second whereases are great, and I guess and then leave the whereases on the final page, on the second page, the last two, because that just guts, idling for 10 minutes uses as much fuel as it takes to travel 5 miles. I don't know if that's even accurate.
I have no objection to it. I think the point is still made.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let's, we have a motion on the table to approve as is, so why don't we go with that, and then we could always ask the Environmental Commission to go back. So, we have our motion and our second, and I'll.
So the motion is voting as is. Mr. Lewis,
No.
Mr. McHugh,
Yes.
Mrs. Rowland,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Choi,
Yes.
Mayor Ewald,
Yes,
motion passes.
and could you take back to the Environmental Commission to just take a look at this and to update it for us? Thank you. Okay, we're gonna open our second hearing of citizens. Same rules apply.
And yeah, same rules as before, and we do have a hand raised on Zoom.
Thank you.
Stuart, you're live?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Good evening. My name is Stuart Carr, C-A-R-R, from 3 Crestwood Drive in Chatham Township. I had one item, but now I have 4. First three, number one, I echo the comments of the committee on the congratulations to Mr. Salvis, and also echo the comments of former Mayor Kevin Sullivan and former Committeewoman Abbott and whoever else spoke on his behalf. A terrific individual, and again, well done by the committee to recognize his service over time. Number two, what is the status actually of 441 Southern Boulevard? We have the bond ordinance that's being set up. Is that a PNS, or not PNS, what do you call it? A purchase and sale agreement been signed? Has it still like a memorandum of understanding? Kind of what is the status on that specifically in contrast to where we were, for example, in December 2023? If you could speak to that just for a moment. Number three, Cap Bank, I agree for about the third or fourth time with Mr. Lois on the skepticism of the use of Cap Bank as kind of a ballast. If you say you're responsible in a particular year for a budget, then stick to that budget for that year, and then the next year start again with kind of a zero-based budget type of concept as opposed to having some fluff or ballast for last year. The whole concept of, well, what if we need something during the year? If you were at the 3.5% or whatever the number is in a given year, then you could always say, holy cow, I have more problems and I'll still have to do something to go to the voters or whatever else. So conceptually, if you want to have a budget, stick to the budget. Or if you don't like what you have, then just have more reserves in there. Pack more into funded depreciation or whatever else, and don't use it as ballast. So again, multi-years agreeing with Mr. Lois on that. Number four, the Oprah issue, which is why I got on the phone, agreeing with Mr. Lois again. That doesn't happen too often, but actually it does happen periodically. In any case, a skepticism with this as it was the other day. I understand and I appreciate Mr. LeConte indicating that we should read the document, and that's good advice. Appreciate that you should always be reading your documents. And number two, the council who gave some comments about why it's good for us, that's good. What the council didn't speak to, and I'd like perhaps if she could do that at some point, is to get to this CJ Griffin attorney or somebody like that who says here is where there were problems with the proposed legislation as opposed to the good things it did. I'm sure what the council just went through are all good things, but it doesn't speak to a lot of different things like the statutory capability via the Oprah versus the common law type of stuff. She didn't speak at all to the fee shifting where it becomes more problematic effectively for people to actually file an Oprah and have these attorneys work on contingency to get there. And then with respect to the issue of the commercial dimension, I'm sure it's in the website someplace, but if Mr. LeConte could produce for the public or for the committee at least, a log of, say, the last 5 years on a monthly basis of what has been happening with these Oprah requests, not only the commercial dimension, but all the other things, to see just what kind of time and effort has been expended just in Chatham Township, what has been happening there, if he could speak to that.
Stuart, that's time.
It's fine. And then finally, if we could have the council speak a little bit to the statutory authorization versus the common law and get somebody here to speak with somebody like Attorney Griffin. So if you're going to put together some kind of a document to your state representatives or to the League of Municipalities or whomever, that you're able to do that from a modicum of knowledge as opposed to just basically being spoon-fed what the League of Municipalities says. So I don't think
Thank you,
it's-
Stuart,
Mr.
your
Carr. I'm
time's
going to
up.
have to ask you to wrap up. Unfortunately, we've
Yes, ma'am.
exceeded our time.
I'm done. Thanks so much for your help.
Thank
But if you
you.
could speak about the 441, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we, are you okay, Ms. Cafoni, to kind of explain the status of 441 or what you can share?
441.
Southern Boulevard,
Yes,
Fensky Park?
yes. The status is, thank you. The status is essentially the same. We've introduced ordinances to further the status, but as of right now, there's nothing that's changed yet. The status has not changed from what was referenced, the letter of intent, I believe it was, that was signed, is the only document that's signed so far. I don't think there's anything that's changed yet. The actions that were taken tonight are in an effort to change that and proceed, but it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
I just want to know, Mayor, essentially, you know, the clock, we paused the clock last year. You know, we introduced, which is exactly what we just did tonight, but we paused the clock because we couldn't go forward due to some concerns that we had to, you know, do our due diligence on, but because you can't carry over an ordinance into the following year, you have to start over. We're just starting over, but picking back up where we left off.
Yeah.
With the assurances now that we can proceed.
Yes. And what I said in my opening statement was, and Mayor Felice last year said the same, was what put us on pause were things that were being dealt with on the seller side, had nothing to do with us. So we were allowing them opportunity to work through, and now we feel we're in a better position to move forward. And we'll, you know, we're all 100% behind the purchase of this property. So, yeah, I guess that's pretty much the status that we could provide at this time. And everything else, thank you. I appreciate your input. Okay, I think we are pretty much wrapped up. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Oh, I didn't close the public session. I'm sorry. Did you have a question? I'm sorry.
I never get up here.
I know.
Tyler Barthel Randolph. I just really want to applaud you guys for raising the LoSAP payments. And this comes as, you know, a private citizen, not as someone of the press. It really awards people who put their time and often their safety aside in such a hustle-bustle world. Working a volunteer position really takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, and it's a really good thing that you guys did. My uncle, the LoSAP payments were a lot of what kept him going financially, even in his darkest times. And if you're wondering why the Courier hasn't reported on the budget as of yet, I was at his funeral. So, but that was, it was really what supported him, both his medical bills, his financial well-being, having a retirement fund. Even though it may not have been, humongous, but it was something, and it was something that really kept him going, even, in his last couple days. So, thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate that, and I'm so sorry for your loss. Okay, did we have anybody else online for the public hearing?
No, we don't have any other hands up.
Okay, in that case, I will close the public hearing, and I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.